This is Basic History with part 2 of the year 1916 in my World War I series. We left off with the French at Verdun struggling and with the British right about to launch into their Somme offensive to try and help relieve some pressure. So let's get right back to it.
The French at Verdun had some relief, thanks to the massive Brusilov offensive currently making mincemeat of the Austrian army, but still needed the British to launch an offensive in the north to relieve pressure. On June 29th, Sir Douglas Haig, commander of British forces, planned to launch the British Fourth Army forward at the Somme to do just that. For 5 days, British artillery fired over 1 million shells to soften German defences. However, most of these would turn out to be duds, and the German fortifications would come through relatively unscathed. Despite this, on the 1st of July, there was a 2-day postponement, the British troops went over the top, all along a 40-kilometre front, and were absolutely massacred. The attack was a complete disaster, as British troops marched straight into over 100 dug-in German machine guns. On the first day of the battle alone, the British suffered 57,470 casualties, of which 19,240 were killed. And yet the battle would continue, as Douglas Haig ordered more attacks. The French, further south, would have more success, and the offensive did achieve one of its main goals, as German men and artillery moved north from Verdun. Back on the Eastern Front, Brusilov had called a halt at the end of June to rest and regroup his troops. See, despite the amazing success of his offensive, Brusilov was furious, as Russian armies further north had repeatedly refused to attack, allowing the Germans to move troops south to save the Austrians from complete collapse. Many analysts after the war would identify this as a big what-if moment of the war, as if the Germans had been successfully pinned down fighting in the north, Brusilov may have been able to force Austria-Hungary out of the war completely. Instead, the Russian Northern Army finally launched a poorly planned operation at the start of July, lost while suffering 80,000 casualties, and the chance was lost. Inept generals were not just an Italian or Austrian disease, they were on display everywhere this summer. Brusilov, who was far from inept, would continue to do great damage to the now Austro-German troops facing him, but the chance for decisive victory would be gone. On July 4th, Mecca fell to the Arabs after a 3-week battle, taking Islam's holy city from the Ottoman Empire. The Arab revolt was gaining serious momentum. By August, the Somme had entered into the second month and had now entered into a stalemate. The Germans had adapted to the British tactic of small attacks all along the line, which had allowed the Brits to gain ground in the first 2 weeks, and were now repulsing most attacks with heavy losses. Sir Douglas Haig believed a breakthrough was imminent, however, and so would order more attacks all month long. Even though the primary objective was achieved, enough pressure had been taken off the French at Verdun for them to stabilise, and no breakthrough seemed possible against well-defended German lines. On August 6th, the Italians launched the 6th Battle of the Isonzo. I can't believe I'm about to say this, they actually broke through and seized the important San Miguel Heights and captured the city of Goritza and 20,000 prisoners. This advantage was thrown away almost immediately, as the Italians allowed the Austrians time to regroup, and when they did pursue on the 12th, they sent waves of men straight at emplaced machine guns, old school style. They would suffer 100,000 casualties by the end of the operation. On September 20th, the massive Brusilov offensive came to an end. Named after its commander, Alexei Brusilov, it had captured 25,000 square kilometers of ground and caused over 1 million casualties on both sides. The Austrians were completely humbled by this and had only been saved by the arrival of German forces. The Germans now had lost all faith in Austrian commanders and Konrad von Hotzendorf especially, and Marshal Paul von Hindenburg would take command of the Eastern Front, completing the takeover of Austrian forces by their German allies. Austria-Hungary was now a junior partner in the war that it had done so much to begin. One effect of the Brusilov offensive was to convince Romania to join the war, and this they did on August 27th, declaring war on the Central Powers. And the war gained yet another front. This would turn out to be a pretty poor decision, as a quick look at the map will tell you. They had a massive land border with Austria-Hungary, had Bulgaria to their south, and the Ottomans controlled access to the Black Sea. The war would not go well for Romania. Another outcome of this was the replacement of Falkenhayn as German Chief of Staff. He had launched the current debacle at Verdun and had swore Romania wouldn't join the war. So he was out and Hindenburg was in, now in command of all German forces, and soon almost all Central Power forces on the continent. On September 2nd, the first Zeppelin was shot down by the new incendiary round by British aircraft over the skies of England, much to the delight of the civilians watching below. And from one new invention to another, on the 15th of September, the British unveiled a weapon that would, in time, change the face of war: the tank. The idea was for an armoured vehicle that could cross no man's land, destroy barbed wire, and fire upon the enemy positions. The first showing was a bit of a lame duck, however, as they had many mechanical problems or were hit by artillery, but were absolutely terrifying for the Germans, and in time, tactics with these massive land ships would improve. The 7th Battle of the Isonzo began in early September and was truly back to business as usual on the Italian front, as men were cut down in the open by Austrian machine guns for no gain. On the 12th, the Allied forces in Salonika, which again was in neutral Greece that the Allies had just decided to occupy, even though Britain got into the war because German troops went into neutral Belgium. However, these troops started their offensive against the Bulgarians as the Balkan front started to heat back up. The autumn rains began falling in the Somme and would turn the area into a complete quagmire and make offensive operations nearly impossible. But Douglas Haig was feeling delusional and was convinced the German lines would crack and he could send in the cavalry to break through, so more attacks would be ordered. Talking about delusional commanders, it was time for Luigi Cadorna to launch the 8th Battle of the Isonzo River. It went exactly as you can predict. Meanwhile, on October 13th, German forces entered Romania from the north and the south. Romania was already in trouble, and although they would manage to stop the combined German-Bulgarian forces for now, Bucharest would fall before the end of the year. On the 24th of October, the French struck back at Verdun, attacking in a heavy fog along an 8-kilometre front, and German morale seemed to collapse as they surrendered in droves, and Fort Douaumont was recaptured after 8 months. France retook in a single day what had taken the Germans 4.5 months to capture. The momentum in Verdun had shifted decisively. October 31st, 9th Battle of Isonzo. Massive losses, small gains. On the 18th of November 1916, the Battle of the Somme came to an end. 420,000 British, 440,000 German, and 200,000 French casualties over 4 months. Despite initial heavy losses, the primary objective had been achieved and pressure taken off Verdun. But after that, the battle had continued with no clear objective. Douglas Haig ordered attack after attack, thinking each one would be the one to crack German lines. This never happened, and never really had a chance of happening. Lessons had been learned though. Tanks and creeping artillery barrages could work if coordination was good, and the French had managed to counterattack at Verdun. So in my opinion, the only way to look at the Somme is as a bloody, inconclusive draw. As has been mentioned before, pressure had been relieved on the French at Verdun, but at no point did a breakthrough seem imminent or even possible. The British had only advanced 9 square miles in over 4 months of fighting and had suffered enormous casualties to advance so little. On November 21st, Austro-Hungarian Empire Franz Joseph, the man whose declaration of war started World War I, died at 88. He was replaced by Emperor Karl. And on December 18th, the longest battle in human history, the Battle of Verdun, came to an end, pretty much exactly where it started, with 650,000 casualties on both sides. It was a French victory, but it come at brutal cost. 1916 was the year of great battles, with massive operations in the Somme, Verdun, in the East, and in Italy, and in the Balkans, and now in Romania, along with Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and Africa. Also on and under the high seas and in the air. Everywhere was war, and this wouldn't change in 1917.